The void stretched before them, endless and unknown. The ancient ship, no longer a rusting relic, pulsed with a quiet, living energy. Jay sat at the helm, the feline mother curled beside him, her cubs nestled close, their golden eyes filled with a deep, knowing intelligence. They had escaped, but what came next? The galaxy was vast, and though they had won their freedom, it was a fragile thing. The enemy had been crippled, but not destroyed. They would come again, seeking retribution, seeking to reclaim what they thought was lost. But Jace was ready. The ship, no, their ship was more than just a vessel. It was a beacon, a promise of something greater. The nanotech that had remade its structure continued to work, shaping and reshaping, evolving. It carried the memories of its past and the potential of its future. And, inexplicably, it had chosen Jace and the feline mother as its pilots, its guardians. Jace leaned back, staring at the endless stars. He had spent his life fixing broken things, never realizing that sometimes the broken things could fix him. He had been a mere mechanic, a wanderer looking for scraps, but now he had a purpose. He had a family, not just the felines, but the ship itself, something ancient and wise, something waiting to be rediscovered. A soft chime echoed from the console, a signal, not from the enemy, but from something older, deeper. The ship responded, shifting course on its own. Jace didn't fight it. He knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning. In the centuries to come, there would be stories whispered across the stars, of a human who found an abandoned ship, of the chained felines who carried a forgotten legacy, and of the moment history changed forever. Some would call a myth, others a legend. But those who saw the ship streak across the night sky knew one thing for certain. Humanity never stopped, and neither did Jace. The void stretched before them, endless and unknown. The ancient ship, no longer a rusting relic, pulsed with a quiet, living energy. Jace sat at the helm, the feline mother curled beside him, her cubs nestled close, their golden eyes filled with a deep, knowing intelligence. They had escaped, but what came next? The galaxy was vast, and though they had won their freedom, it was a fragile thing. The enemy had been crippled, but not destroyed. They would come again, seeking retribution, seeking to reclaim what they thought was lost. But Jace was ready. The ship, no, their ship was more than just a vessel. It was a beacon, a promise of something greater. The nanotech that had remade its structure continued to work, shaping and reshaping, evolving. It carried the memories of its past and the potential of its future. And, inexplicably, it had chosen Jace and the feline mother as its pilots, its guardians. Jace leaned back, staring at the endless stars. He had spent his life fixing broken things, never realizing that sometimes the broken things could fix him. He had been a mere mechanic, a wanderer looking for scraps, but now he had a purpose. He had a family, not just the felines, but the ship itself, something ancient and wise, something waiting to be rediscovered. A soft chime echoed from the console, a signal, not from the enemy, but from something older, deeper. The ship responded, shifting course on its own. Jace didn't fight it. He knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning. In the centuries to come, there would be stories whispered across the stars, of a human who found an abandoned ship, of the chained felines who carried a forgotten legacy, and of the moment history changed forever. Some would call a myth, others a legend. But those who saw the ship streak across the night sky knew one thing for certain. Humanity never stopped, and neither did Jace. Jace Carter wiped a layer of dust and coolant residue from his gloves, sighing as he scanned the derelict ship before him. The wreckage drifted in the void, its hull scarred and pitted from long exposure to the harshness of deep space. He had seen plenty of abandoned ships in his time, but this one felt different. There was something eerie about how it just hung there, untouched, like a relic frozen in time. The distress beacon had been weak, almost a whisper, but something about it had compelled him to investigate. His own ship, the Trailblazer, hummed behind him, its docking clamps securely fastened to the relic's crumbling airlock. Jace adjusted his helmet, ran a final diagnostic on his EVA suit, and stepped forward. The door hissed open with a groan of metal straining against years of decay. Inside, the corridor was dark, save for the dim emergency lights flickering along the walls. He activated his wrist-mounted flashlight, sweeping the beam across the interior. The ship's architecture was unmistakably alien. Smooth curves, intricate carvings etched into the metal. A civilization long forgotten. Jace's boots echoed as he moved cautiously, keeping one hand on his sidearm. Scavengers weren't the only dangers lurking in these floating tombs. He had encountered rogue security drones, automated defense systems still clinging to outdated protocols, and on rare occasions, things far worse. But this time, the silence unsettled him more than any threat. Then he heard it, a faint sound, a whimpering noise barely perceptible over the crackling of his comms. He froze. Adjusting his audio filters, he focused on the noise. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic. He followed the sound, weaving through the wreckage. The ship had suffered severe damage, collapsed hallways, exposed wiring, entire sections vented to space. The deeper he went, the stronger the noise became. A pain mewling, weak and desperate. Jace turned a corner and stopped dead. In the dim light, he saw a figure chained to the wall. No, not a figure. A creature. A feline-like alien, its fur matted and streaked with grime, was shackled to the bulkhead. Her large, luminous eyes flickered open at his approach, filled with exhaustion and wariness. She had the build of a predator, sleek, powerful, but severely malnourished. And then Jace saw the real reason his heart clenched. Nestled against her, half hidden in the shadows, were 3 tiny cubs. Their frail bodies pressed against their mother for warmth, their small tails twitching in restless sleep. Jace swore under his breath. He had expected to find old tech, maybe a lost data cache, certainly not a mother and her children left to die in a drifting husk. His mind raced with questions. Who had done this? Why? The restraints on her limbs weren't old. They were polished, reinforced. Someone had left her here on purpose. The mother let out a low, warning growl, baring her fangs despite her evident weakness. Jace slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. He crouched down, keeping his voice calm. Easy there, girl. I'm not here to hurt you. Her ears twitched, but her body remained tense. Jace scanned her with his wrist display. Heart rate erratic, severe dehydration, and malnutrition. The cubs were even worse off. If he didn't act fast, they wouldn't survive much longer. All right, he muttered. Let's get you out of here. He examined the shackles. Advanced alloy, possibly biometric locks. He wasn't going to break these with brute force. He retrieved a small hacking tool from his belt and pressed it against the restraints. A series of numbers and symbols flickered across his HUD as the tool worked through the security protocols. The mother tensed, watching him intently. Jace could feel the weight of her gaze, filled with distrust, but also hope. She wanted to believe he was here to help, but whatever had happened to her before made trust a dangerous thing. The first shackle released with a soft click. Jace moved to the next one. Almost there, a noise echoed from the corridor behind him. Jace's instincts flared. He spun, drawing his sidearm. The shadows shifted, and a metallic figure stepped into view. A security drone. Its optics glowed red as it scanned him, then the feline. Unauthorized life forms detected. Initiating containment. Jace barely had time to react before the drone's weapon ports snapped open. He dove forward, shielding the feline and her cubs as the drone fired. The plasma bolts seared past his armor, narrowly missing his head. Jace rolled, coming up with his sidearm leveled. He squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of kinetic rounds slamming into the drone's chassis. The first few shots dented the armor, but didn't penetrate. Damn it, Jace muttered. The drone advanced, recalibrating its aim. Jace dove behind a fallen bulkhead, heart pounding. He needed a new plan. Standard weapons weren't going to cut it. The feline mother growled weakly. Jace spared her a glance. She was still shackled, unable to move, and the cubs were exposed. He gritted his teeth. He had to end this fast. His eyes darted around the corridor. There, an exposed power conduit sparking intermittently. If he could lure the drone closer. Jace popped up from cover and fired again, this time aiming at the drone's optics. The impact distorted its vision for a split second, just long enough for Jace to sprint toward the conduit. He reached out, grabbed a severed cable, and wrenched it free. A high-pitched whine filled the air as energy arced across the exposed wires. "Come on, you hunk of junk," he growled. The drone refocused, locking onto him. Jace waited. The moment it stepped close enough, he jammed the live cable into its chassis. The surge of energy overloaded its circuits. The drone spasmed violently before collapsing in a smoking heap. Jace exhaled. That was too close. He turned back to the feline mother. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. He knelt beside her, resuming his work on the shackles. "Let's get you out of here before more of those things show up." Another lock clicked open, then another. Finally, with a soft clatter, the last restraint fell away. The feline slumped forward but caught herself, still weak but free. Jace held out a water ration. "Drink. You need it." She hesitated before taking it, sipping cautiously. He smiled. "Good. Now let's grab your kids and get out of this floating graveyard." A deep, metallic rumble echoed through the ship. Jace's stomach dropped. That was not a good sound. The ship was waking up. Jace barely had a moment to react as the ship rumbled beneath him. The chains binding the alien feline mother rattled violently, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched her cubs. The security drone that had once been a mere inconvenience now loomed as a deadly threat, its scanning eye pulsing red. Jace's instincts kicked in. He dove behind a pile of broken consoles just as the drone fired, a plasma bolt searing through the space where he had stood a heartbeat ago. He yanked his plasma cutter from his belt, but he knew the tool wasn't designed for combat. He had to think fast. The ship's systems were waking up. Lights flickered erratically, and strange glyphs scrolled across the remaining intact monitors. Whatever ancient intelligence lurked in the ship's core, it was no longer dormant. The feline mother let out a strangled cry, and Jace saw why. The chains weren't just restraining her. They were tightening. Damn it. Jace growled. He pulled his multi-tool and sprinted toward her, dodging another plasma blast from the drone. Sparks erupted from a nearby console as he slid under a low-hanging pipe, using the moment of cover to assess the chains. They were mechanized, likely part of an ancient containment system, and they were retracting to pull her into a reinforced alcove. He had seconds to act. Ignoring the drone, Jace plunged his tool into the chain's locking mechanism, overriding its manual release. The ship responded immediately, a screeching alarm blaring through the chamber. The drone pivoted sharply, recognizing Jace as the priority target. "Not today," he muttered, grabbing a nearby piece of metal debris and hurling it at the drone's sensor array. The makeshift projectile struck true, cracking its optical lens. The drone faltered, its targeting systems scrambling. The feline mother let out a desperate yowl as one of the chains snapped open, but the others held firm. The cubs were huddled beneath her, their tiny forms shaking. Jace gritted his teeth and pried at the second lock, his tool sparking as he forced a bypass. Then the ship spoke, not in words, but in a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through Jace's bones. The symbols on the monitors flared, and suddenly he understood. The ship wasn't just waking up, it was deciding what to do with him. Not in words, but in a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through Jace's bones. The symbols on the monitors flared, and suddenly he understood. The ship wasn't just waking up, it was deciding what to do with him. The chains released all at once, and the feline mother collapsed, gasping for breath. But Jace barely had time to register it before the floor beneath him shifted. A section of the ship's structure split apart, revealing something buried deep within the relic's core. But not just any engine. This was ancient technology, far beyond anything the current galaxy could produce. Jace's breath caught. He had stumbled onto something far bigger than a derelict vessel. This ship, this relic, was never truly abandoned. It was a secret, hidden in plain sight that now, It had chosen him. Feline mother stared at him, her golden eyes filled with something beyond fear. Recognition. Then the ship's systems surged back to life, and alarms blared anew. Something else was coming. Jace barely had a moment to process the revelation before the ship roared to life around him. The deck trembled, ancient mechanisms grinding into motion as if the vessel had been waiting for his arrival. The feline mother remained close to her cubs, her golden eyes flicking between Jace and the pulsating core of the ship. Then, the warning alarm shifted. No longer chaotic, but rhythmic, calculated. Something was coming. Jace spun toward the nearest display, where alien glyphs reconfigured into recognizable patterns. A proximity alert. Multiple signals were approaching fast, too fast to be simple scavengers. His gut twisted. Someone knew he was here, and they weren't friendly. The ship's defense systems were offline. The drone he had disabled was likely just a leftover remnant of its old security. Whatever was inbound would not be so easily fooled. All right, Jace exhaled, gripping his plasma cutter. Looks like we're not getting out of this quietly. The feline mother let out a low growl, her body tensed. She understood the danger. Jace glanced at her cubs, too young to fight, too fragile to flee on their own. That left one option. He had to get them out. Fast, he sprinted toward the ship's control console, fingers dancing over the unfamiliar interface. The ship responded faster than expected, as if it had been waiting for someone to take the helm. A schematic flickered into view. Escape pods, long dormant but still intact. A heavy thud echoed through the hull. Then another. The sound of docking clamps. Jace didn't need a translator to know what that meant. A ship's ancient AI pulsed again, and suddenly, a choice appeared before him. The controls highlighted two options. Reactivate the ship's internal defenses, using whatever power remained. Override the docking locks and attempt an emergency launch. Both were risks. The ship was still waking up, its full capabilities unknown. If he chose to fight, he might not have the firepower. If he tried to escape, there was no guarantee the engines would even fire. Another heavy impact. The sound of boarding clamps locking into place. Jace made his choice. He slammed the override for the engines, praying they still had life left in them. The ship shuddered violently. Internal mechanisms screaming in protest. Panels sparked, and for a moment, it seemed like nothing would happen. Then the ship lurched. Gravity twisted as the relic tore itself free from its decaying orbit, breaking away from the unseen enemy trying to board. Jace was thrown against the console, pain jolting through his ribs. The feline mother and her cubs tumbled, but managed to brace against the shifting floor. A distant explosion rocked the hull. Something fired at them. A plasma bolt sizzled past the viewport, too close for comfort. Come on, come on, Jace muttered, forcing himself upright. He gripped the controls, urging the ship forward, deeper into the void. The engines screamed. Old systems pushed beyond their limits, but the ship responded. Then, a final warning blared across the console. An incoming missile lock. Jace clenched his teeth. Hold on. The ship, impossibly, responded to his command, as if it had been waiting for a pilot. And then, against all odds, it dodged. The ship twisted through the void with an agility that defied its decayed exterior, weaving between bursts of plasma fire that lit up the darkness like silent explosions. Jace clung to the controls, his breath sharp and quick. The feline mother crouched beside him, her tail lashing, golden eyes reflecting the frantic lights of the console. All right, girl, Jace muttered. If you got any ideas, now's the time. The ship jolted violently as another blast grazed the hull. Damage reports flickered across the console. Shields failing, structural integrity compromised. But there was something else. A pulsing command deep within the system, a final option waiting to be executed. The ship had one last weapon. Jace's fingers hesitated over the ancient controls. It wasn't just any weapon. It was a self-destruct sequence rigged to channel all remaining energy into a single pulse. A desperate, last-ditch effort. If he used it, He'd have one shot to escape with the felines before the ship tore itself apart. He glanced at the mother. Her ears twitched, sensing his hesitation. Then, to his astonishment, she moved. Not away, but toward the console. Her claws tapped the control panel, and the ship's ancient AI pulsed in recognition. A flood of data rushed through the interface. Not destruction, transformation. The ship wasn't dying. It was evolving. The old, rusted plates of the hull began to shift, ancient nanotech surging to life. Energy crackled through long-dead conduits, welding gaps, reinforcing armor. The ship was responding not just to Jace, but to the felines. They had been here before. They were part of this vessel's legacy. Grinned, gripping the controls. Well, that changes things. Enemy ships closed in, unaware of the trap being set. The moment they entered range, the ship struck. A shockwave of energy erupted from the core, disrupting the enemy's systems, sending their ships spinning. Jace seized the opportunity, pushing the engines to their limit. The relic ship surged forward, escaping the battlefield just as the enemy struggled to regain control. The feline mother let out a soft, satisfied growl. They were free. Jace exhaled, tension bleeding from his shoulders. Let's find a new home. As they drifted into uncharted space, the ship, no longer a relic, but something reborn, continued to change, whispering secrets from a past yet to be uncovered. And for the first time, Jace realized he wasn't just a mechanic anymore, that was part of something far greater. The void stretched before them, endless and unknown. The ancient ship, no longer a rusting relic, pulsed with a quiet, living energy. Jace sat at the helm. The feline mother curled beside him, her cubs nestled close, their golden eyes filled with a deep, knowing intelligence. They had escaped, but what came next? The galaxy was vast, and though they had won their freedom, it was a fragile thing. The enemy had been crippled, but not destroyed. They would come again, seeking retribution, seeking to reclaim what they thought was lost. But Jace was ready. The ship, no, their ship, was more than just a vessel. It was a beacon, a promise of something greater. The nanotech that had remade its structure continued to work, shaping and reshaping, evolving. It carried the memories of its past and the potential of its future. And, inexplicably, it had chosen Jace and the feline mother as its pilots, its guardians. Jace leaned back, staring at the endless stars. He had spent his life fixing broken things, never realizing that sometimes the broken things could fix him. He had been a mere mechanic, a wanderer looking for scraps, but now he had a purpose. He had a family, not just the felines, but the ship itself, something ancient and wise, something waiting to be rediscovered. A soft chime echoed from the console. A signal, not from the enemy, but from something older, deeper. The ship responded, shifting course on its own. Jace didn't fight it. He knew, somehow, that this was just the beginning. In the centuries to come, there would be stories whispered across the stars, of a human who found an abandoned ship, of the chained felines who carried a forgotten legacy, and of the moment history changed forever. Some would call a myth, others a legend. But those who saw the ship streak across the night sky knew one thing for certain. Humanity never stopped, and neither did Jace.